Good evening, everyone. I'd like to get started this evening. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have all of council here today. It's good to see everybody. We have a full deck here, so that's awesome. Welcome back. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call this evening, or this meeting together, approval of the agenda. There's a few changes that I would like to make. First off, I would like to move item 8.3 ahead of 8.1. And I would also like to remove items 9.4 and 10.1. The reason for that is that some members of council have some further input that they would like to make into the policy for 9.4, and this would just allow additional time for them to meet with staff. So I would like to remove 9.4, and then 10.1 goes with 9.4, so I would like to remove those from tonight's agenda completely, and then move 8.3 ahead of 8.1. So moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Pearson. And we also just need to include, there's some supplementary information that goes with one of our delegations, 5.2. So we'll just have these yellow items included into the agenda. So that's moved. Okay, we're removing 9.4 and 10.1. And then we're shifting 8.3 ahead of 8.1, and we're including the yellow pages with tonight's package. So that's been moved and seconded. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we have meeting minutes here for adoption, regular council meeting of May the 8th and the special council meeting of May the 15th. Would someone like to move adoption? That's moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Are there any corrections or questions? Councillor Ray, please.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, can you turn on your microphone? Thank you.
Got to get organized here. Page 8 of the meeting minutes of May the 8th, under 13.3, the very first motion that was moved, it has Councillor Ray as in favor and absent as Councillor Parkinson, and those need to be reversed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Good catch.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So there's some discrepancy on what a duplex is expected in our building bylaw. And if you read, it says, duplex means a building in which two dwelling units are placed either one above the other or side by side and sharing a common wall. But yet, if you look over at the other section, townhouse. Remember, it said common wall. Townhouse means a residential building comprised of three or more dwelling units separated from one another by party walls extending from foundation to roof, with each dwelling having a separate direct entrance. And then it talks about row houses. It means a multi-family dwelling consisting of attached dwelling units, each of which is situated on a sum fee simple lot, side-by-side series where each unit shares one or two party walls. And party walls are a partition wall. So they have a fire capability between them. So when it talks about duplexes in here, it doesn't say party wall anywhere. It just says a common wall. So in our definitions, it doesn't say what a definition of a common wall is or a party wall anywhere in the bylaw. So it's up to interpretation by whoever's using this book, whether it works or doesn't work or is prescriptive. It talks more and more about what a suite is and what a suite's expected. But more importantly, I've been talking to staff about strataing a duplex or making a common wall so that I could do the strata and so on. The point is, we've done it before. We've done it before on more than one occasion. And I don't expect everybody to know all the history that's gone on Sooke since we've incorporated. But the thing is, I've been around the whole time, so I know the history and I know what's been done. I've done some of the work on some, and I know people who've done the work on some of the others. Plus, I know that we've subdivided them, we've strated them, so we've allowed it to happen in the past. And it's the same zoning bylaw. So for it to mean it 1 week or 1 year, and for it to not mean it the next week or the next year, runs into problems. And I just want to try and get it to where there's no problems anymore, where we have an understanding, mutual understanding, or where there's dialogue when you go into a backdoor room meeting or whatever, where it's not just this is the only way we're going to see it, and that's that. If there was more of a round table discussion in a group amongst each other, and we could come up with some discrepancies that work and don't work, and maybe even put into the zoning bylaw if we're going to do any changes to it, put in more meetings, put in more definitive meanings of exactly what it is we're trying to say on a work. When it talks about row houses and townhouses, it says party walls, partition walls, and those are fire-rated walls. When it talks about duplexes, it talks about a common wall. And a common wall can be anything to join the buildings together. And more importantly, when we talk about any of our multifamily zones in Sooke, any of them at all are allowed to do what's called cluster dwellings. And if you look up cluster dwelling, it says you can do single family, duplexes, or threeplexes, and none of them have to be attached by any wall. So our whole idea, ever since I was on council from the beginning and stuff to now, was to try and create more affordable housing options any way we can. Come up with a situation where some properties are weird shaped and so on, so you stick a unit over in the corner here, and it still marries up to the same quality and style with the other units. So you got single units, duplexes, threeplexes, all over the place. So why, in the end, do we even care if you common wall a duplex or you don't common wall one? Let's find some ways to make housing affordable in Sooke by coming up with all kinds of ideas on how to make this stuff work or happen. And in the past, again, I've done strata conversions on houses with suites. I've done strata conversions on houses with 2 on the property. They've just happened. And in this case here, I'm just trying to come up with more options for people who own pieces of property and still do everything by the book. They have their own separate water sources. They have their own drainage. They have everything's in place. So they're no different than a regular house, other than you're just trying to come up with a way to make it work. But thank you very much for your time.
Okay, well, just wait a second, Mr. Haldane.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing this forward, and I appreciate your efforts always in finding ways to address the affordable housing challenges in Sooke, and also working with the difficult lots, either the topography or the layout or whatever. Your creativity is certainly appreciated. What I want to know, though, is I thank you for bringing this to our attention. What is it that council can do at this point to assist you in moving forward with what you're hoping to accomplish?
Well, come to some consensus on what a common wall is, I guess, would be starters. But when I first applied to do this, I applied under the fact that I thought we were going to do it through a duplex process and common wall. Since then, I've talked to the surveyor, licensed BC surveyor, and asked him what his experience was in it and so on. And he said, they don't even have to join anyway, so why are you worried about joining them? And I didn't know that. So there you go. I'm learning something every day, too. The point is, he said, if you've got 2 pre-existing, or you've got 2 buildings on the property, in this case, one of them is pre-existing, the other one we're allowed to build because the existing house actually is under 968 square feet, which is smaller than what our detached suite size is. So it's been a house since 1914. So it's been on the property the entire time. Now we're building a brand new house on there, which is 1,400 square feet, and we want to have the option of doing a strata. And the only reason I'm picking strata is because highways won't allow us a second access. They're saying, we've sterilized Sooke Road to the point where we do not want more accesses on it. Right. So my options are to create one access to access both these properties. So if we create a common area on the property and strata it, they'll both be able to back into one common spot and then head out to Sooke Road face first, so you're not backing out into traffic and so on. And in a sense, creating a common area on the property for sharing the service of parking. And then we won't have parking issues either. There's lots of parking on this piece of property because of it. So,
I see. Okay. So questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Casper, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you give us an example of where you have done a strata conversion where there hasn't been a common wall?
Where there hasn't been a common wall?
Hasn't been a common wall.
There was down on Eustis Road, and this happened, and oddly enough, it's one of Kevin Pearson's relatives, but there was an old house on the property, built a separate suite in the back, and this was Phil or Reg Davies, but did a separate suite in the back. And for the first while, he was doing the rent out thing, but then his son moved into it. Son started to raise a family, and he came to council and said, well, why don't I divide this off? Came in front of us. This was back in probably 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. So we did a panhandle lot for him, allowed him to subdivide it off the back, and he lives in it to this very day. But it was less than 968 square feet. This was a building that we were trying to create because a father wanted to offer it out to his son. He could have fee simple. He could own his own piece of property, get a mortgage, and start a life. I'd like to see it happen more often. I mean, really, that's the only way to do infill without somebody going through a $15,000 stormwater management plan and a $1,500 sewer inclusion and then $2,500 traffic study and so on. So you start going through all this stuff, and then you still have to pay DCCs on top of that for when you do a subdivision and so on. So you're getting into 50, 60. I've heard close to 70,000, even in some cases, once they go to really expensive stormwater management systems and stuff. Well, that's too much money for somebody to spend taking a lot off mom and dad's property to try and build themselves a house. You're getting up there to the point where it's not much of a gift anymore.
Okay, follow-up question?
No, my last question. So you were on council when the strata conversion policy was established.
Correct.
So to the best of your recollection, I'm sure Councillor Berger and Mayor Tate could attest to it. What was the rationale in creating that policy?
Well,
why did you do it?
We had nothing in place at the time to be able to make something happen. And what was happening at the time was we were taking those older houses, the 70s houses up in Broomhill subdivision and stuff like that, and we were trying to find ways, because they were quite big, the lots there were duplexable. They were 800 square meter lots, and our duplex zone says 600 square meters will do. Anyhow, we were trying to give them ways in order to be able to add on to those homes or to create living spaces in the basements and stuff like that. So what we ended up doing was reading up on it, and strata conversion policies are taking an old building, converting it into two, and being able to do a strata. But you have to make sure the old building's up to it says substantial BC building code. So they want you to insulate them a bit more, put in some ground fault breakers in the wiring to check the drainage system, make sure there's proper drainage, and hook up to the sewer properly, so on and so forth. So that policy was brought in so that we could start adding on to old homes, start fixing up old homes and adding second homes onto it, and doing some creative stuff with older properties. They do it in Saanich, Victoria, V Royal. They do it all over the place now. And if you read up on it, the reason they brought in strata conversion policies in Victoria in the first place was because they wanted it to happen on their single-family homes and on garages to subdivide off and things, but they didn't want it to happen to apartment buildings. They had all those old walk-up apartment buildings down on Cook Street Village and things like that developers were buying up, and then they were kicking all the renters out, and they were turning them into strata units and creating an impact on the rental market in Victoria. So they created the province came in and said, listen, you guys have to do something to fix this. So they came up with a strata conversion policy, and it was based on protecting rental stock, but rental multifamily stock, not trying to fix the suite problem in your basement or whatever. They're trying to fix you from being able to buy apartment buildings and kick everybody out and turn them into single units to sell. So.
Okay. Microphone.
So if I may, a freestanding suite or detached unit is a habitable family dwelling, correct?
It says it right in your zoning bylaw under residential units, and a suite is a residential unit.
Right.
But in this case, it would make that suite a fee simple. It would no longer be an accessory to the main.
Well, no, a strata is not fee simple. Registration.
No, but okay, let me correct myself here. The idea, though, is not to have this as one dwelling with a secondary unit. The idea, I believe, is to have separate ownership. So there are two separate ones, and that's where the strata piece kicks in.
Correct.
Right? So it's not. So in this case, it's not a principal house with an accessory carriage house that's rented out, but all the lot is under the same. This is having a strata. They would share a common driveway, common parking, maybe common grounds, but they are both under separate title.
Yeah.
separate title, not
you would
be
sell them
single
off separately. They could be
title.
two different owners.
Two different owners on
Yeah.
this on that same property.
But that's strata conversion in its
Right.
best. The whole idea, but I built a couple of them up in Broom Hill subdivision where you took an old house that had a suite in the downstairs, fixed up the suite, put a 1-hour fire rating in them from a 45-minute fire rating, which is all you need for a suite. Put a 1-hour fire rating in, and then create 2 units out of one house and then sell them both separately. But that was a way to make it affordable to fix up a neighborhood that was quite run down. Those houses needed a lot of work. That was a $140,000 renovation to it. So in this case, you took an old house, you painted it, roofed it, redid the yard, landscaping, everything, sold 2 units off, and there was enough money to be able to cover the cost of that and still make it profitable enough to do that. And then 2 people, instead of a house selling for $500,000, 2 people were buying for $250,000 or $275,000. So you're splitting the cost of what a big house is worth, and you're creating 2 affordable units that a young family or somebody who doesn't make the $85,000 a year, which is supposed to be our average in Sooke for family income, who's not making that can afford to buy into something else. So.
Okay. So at this point then, Council, is it the case that you would like to have a staff report come back so we can see how we can address this, take a look at the policy, have it updated? Councillor Pearson, then Ray, please.
Well, and again, I think that Mr. Haldane has hit on some fundamental issues that we leave ourselves kind of in these situations where there's interpretation, the common wall, and where we start off, we've offered a building permit, and we've got 2 buildings on a piece of property. Now we're coming down to a dispute of is this a strata conversion or is it a secondary suite? And to me, it doesn't really matter. We're doing a smart thing with this property. I've had an opportunity to actually walk the property and look at the builder and Mr. Haldane's opportunity, where he was intending to put this common wall between the 2. And when I look at his discerning of the common wall, it doesn't make sense to me to be wasting money on it just to have another house. Like, the builder, which is not Mr. Haldane, he's the builder, but there's an owner as well involved. So we're adding costs, and we're taking away from rental stock and affordable housing in our town core. We're tied up by the West Coast Road, one access. So this actually is a very smart project, and it's challenging because we have some weird stuff in our bylaw. What I'd like to see is the challenge to our bylaw and our definition, so that it's not subject to interpretation, because interpretation means I look at it one way and somebody else looks at it another way, and then there's a difference of opinion. So I think we need to look at this project as in itself is that we have numerous ones around Sooke where there's been mobile homes on a common piece of property with a board between mobile homes, and that's called the duplex. Well, that's not the intent of the bylaw, nor was it there. But again, it's that affordability piece that we're challenged with. So I think we have an obligation to fix our definitions through this process. But then how do we help this particular application or this delegation go forward with their project, because they're stonewalled right now. So.
Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Ray, then Casper, please.
Thank you. And taking into account everything that's been presented by Mr. Haldane and the comments by Councillors Casper and Pearson, I think for myself, when you start to wade into the legalities of interpreting the bylaw, the Strata Property Act, different schedules, different pieces of legislation, that's just not my area. And I would rather get a legal, I know there's a cost to it, but I think if we're going to start talking about what we have done, and I'm not going to say it was done wrong or right, but just because it's been done to date may not mean that we've dotted all our I's and crossed our T's when we've done things. So for me, if this, here in this forum, I think we need to have a good understanding what the legal requirements are before we start making any decisions, that we have a good understanding as a council what's involved, because I don't know the Strata Property Act. I don't know some of these other things, and I'm not in the business of building any longer. So that's my comment.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, but, I think there's an inherent danger in searching out some mumbo-jumbo legal opinion that just ties everybody's hands and actually creates more confusion amongst the people around this table. I don't support going that route. When you look at the policy, and it's been in place since 2010, I would suspect that a lawyer or somebody must have had some influence in drafting that document, or it was based on some degree of wisdom, otherwise it wouldn't exist. What is the issue here, and it's an important element in my mind, is how soon is the applicant going to have a document presented to council for their decision? It's 100% our decision. So council must approve and can only approve a strata conversion. I'm not interested in a bare land strata. I'm not interested in a fee simple subdivision. I think that what's being presented here basically conforms with the principle behind the strata conversion policy and what the past practice of the district's been. So I hope that we soon see an application, because it's up to us to decide. Staff gives a report. There's about 8 or 9 items that council can consider and let the chips fall where they may around the table. Okay. And sooner that happens, the better.
So in this case, you're recommending then that, well, you'd suggest to Mr. Haldane that he submit the application. It does come to council under our authority, so then we would receive the application and receive it at an upcoming meeting. Okay. Councillor Ebony, or pardon me, Councillor Loggins. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I've been away for a while, so I forgive you. Thank you, Mr. Haldane, for bringing this forward. I really appreciate that you are looking creatively at things for our community, and I agree with Councillor Casper and would like to make a motion that we receive a staff report.
A staff report or an application?
Oh, sorry, yes, application with the options we were talking about, right? Yeah.
Okay, so the motion then is that we recommend to the applicant that he do the application, and then that will trigger the staff report to
right,
the
trigger the report, absolutely. Yeah.
Are you comfortable?
Appreciate that. Yeah, we were just looking for direction because the application process costs a certain amount of money and it's a fee involved, so I think it's $700. So if there's some buy-in to the understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here, then by all means we'll
I think once, so that's been moved and seconded, once we receive that, then it'll give council just more context.
Absolutely.
And then I think what would be necessary then is, do we then need to update the residential strata title conversion policy? So then down the road, when these unique situations come up again, we're not trying to remember, oh, this particular house that was built here. I think the policies have to reflect what council's will, so there's a proper tracking and understanding, so that when other situations like this come up with, then it's clear in the policy and we're not trying to remember or guess what happened here, there, or whatever, and that'll clarify.
And I think if you do look at the policy too, you'll see that there's a couple of corrections that need to be made. It talks about Bylaw 65, which is an old servicing bylaw, and I mentioned earlier it says his application. It doesn't say theirs or hers, it just says his, and you know, those components should be probably tweaked or fixed, I think.
Yeah, and our deputy corporate officer has a long list of policies that will be brought forward to council, but certainly this can start and move one. Okay, also speaking to the motion, Councillor Parkinson, then I'll go to, oh, sorry, it was Councillor Berger, then to Councillor. Staff have a question. I'll go to Councillor Berger first. Sorry, Councillor Berger.
No, that's okay, thank you. My comments are similar to those that have been made. I was on council with Mr. Haldane and yourself when we brought in the strata title conversion policy. And as Mr. Haldane said, that's exactly what we brought in for, was that that was when the cost of housing was really starting to rise. So it was giving people an opportunity to not only infill our sewer system, update old neighborhoods, as well as provide affordable housing. Like Councillor Pearson, I also went to the property and then did some homework this week and reviewed not only our strata title conversion policy, but also the Strata Land Titles Act, which talks a little bit about conversions. And I emailed back and forth with staff a bit as well, just to make sure I was understanding it appropriately. It seems to me like it would be a good fit, and I think that having Mr. Haldane bring an application for this conversion policy would sort of get things moving in the right direction.
Okay. Staff had a question? Mr. Blackwell?
Yes, Your Worship. This is a council, if it's a building conversion strata, it's a council decision. It's council's authority, not staff. So, or I mean, staff doesn't need to do a staff report. So we'd need direction if you do want staff resources spent on this, or if you just want it coming directly to council.
We would just need the application to come forward, and then whatever. So I think that's what I thought with the report. It would be, you know, you could bring the application and then even attach the policy to it, so that we have all the relevant material there together.
And I just want to add the strata conversion. From what I read in the Act, it's for previously occupied buildings.
Okay.
So just adding that.
Thank you. Councillor Loggins, is that your understanding? Were you looking for more materials from staff?
Not necessarily more materials, just as you say, sorry, the word's not coming to me.
The relevant materials.
The relevant material that we, yeah, and then
Okay.
that way if we need to make any changes, we could go through and take a good hard look at it at that point. But yeah, just no extra work.
Okay, I think staff have a full plate. Councillor Berger, did you have something else to add?
No, not really.
Okay.
I just was it within the one of the acts that I read, and I can maybe get the information back to staff and to you guys. Somewhere it did say that that a strata conversion could be applied to a new dwelling. However, you had to have a sign off by a legal qualified surveyor. So just maybe that just for Mr. Haldane's knowledge, that he can look through what his requirements are.
Okay, and the other thought, if you do come across that, if you could forward that through to staff, then they'll bring it forward with the application and council will have that together. Back to our CAO, please.
Just to add to that, Your Worship, for a new building, it would be the approving officer that would need to be the authority on that one.
I see. Okay, so we'll get that. Okay?
Yep.
All right, good. I'll call the question then on the motion, and that is that council recommend that Mr. Haldane apply for the strata conversion. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you for your
very
time,
much.
Mr.
Appreciate
Haldane.
the time.
Okay, we'd like to welcome our next delegation forward from the Juan de Fuca Marine Search and Rescue Society, Mr. Bragio? Pardon me? Okay, there's a different name down here, so that's why. Okay, hello and welcome. All right, welcome.
sorry. On average, we respond to at least 35 taskings in this area, with over half of them in the Sooke Basin and Whiff and Spit area. Our Station 37 Sooke is on call 365 days, 24 hours a day, or 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. We have worked with local authorities like the police and fire department for various missions when tasked. We have teamed up with land-based search and rescue crews for shoreline searches as well. This year, we are already above the yearly average with 10 call-outs and some high-profile rescues of sinking vessels and boats on the rocks. We had 3 just this past long weekend. With Thursday, I was involved in one of them. The importance of being funded on a yearly basis. Your financial help would allow the Fuca Marine Rescue Society to continue to operate at the highest trained level with continued uninterrupted emergency marine response coverage for the Fuca area and the coastline around Sooke. It would allow for the ongoing partnership with other emergency response organizations that need to be maintained to industry standards and Transport Canada regulated levels. Most importantly, your grant or yearly budget contribution would allow for some relief for volunteers that have to do fundraising to support the current operational costs of our rescue station. This would positively affect our ability to train and crew the station to best serve our communities. Thank you very much on behalf of your Marine Rescue Specialists. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Burchett, for attending in for your delegation this evening. And I understand you've provided your financials. So were you looking for a grant request from council for this year or ongoing years, or how may we assist you? We would like to build on the grant request that we proposed earlier, but I would love it if we could be involved in the yearly budget. Machosen has offered to put us in their yearly budget. We're going back in October to Machosen. We applied for their grant as well this year. Okay, I believe we covered off, was it $500? That is correct for recruitment. For recruitment. And what was your overall budgetary request at that time? The original one was $7,500. On the updated one that we just submitted, we've upped it to $10,500, depending on whether that's going to be grant money or if you could include us in your yearly budget. Okay. Our budget for this year has already been adopted now, so it would be something, unless council chooses otherwise, that we'd have to look at in the fall for upcoming years. Councillor Casper, then Parkinson,
yes,
then Pearson.
I'd like to thank you for the presentation. So my question relates to this. It's good to hear that you've got an agreement with Machosen. Is there any similar agreement with the Fuca Area Director?
We have not approached them, although we're going to Colwood and Langford as well.
Great.
Again, the application times are later on.
So I'm prepared to support some level of matching funding in conjunction with those other jurisdictions, and perhaps it would be to your benefit and all of our collective benefit if the 4 areas, political areas, could perhaps come to an agreement and do it together.
That is a possibility. What was presented to me by Mayor Rands and Machosen was they were very contingent to us working with their fire department in East Sooke, doing a mission with them and joint training. So we worked together. So they were in support of that. So that is specific to Machosen, although I don't know how we could get together as a group and figure out the funding that would help us work together that way. I mean, I'm open to suggestions or direction on how to find that.
As you know, there are boaters from all jurisdictions, right? And you're covering a wide area of 3 jurisdictions, and I think there's a responsibility on all our shoulders to assist.
I agree.
But I think we have to do it together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I would hope the mayor could actually lead that challenge on your behalf. I'm sure she has an appetite for it.
I do, but you've articulated it so well that I was thinking I should just task it to you. Councillor Parkinson, then Pearson, please.
Thank you for coming this evening, and I do appreciate everything that you all do out on the water.
Thank you.
I was just curious, how many of the rescues were in the waters around Sooke?
About 70% of our rescues actually are in between Whiff and Spit and in the basin. All 3 that were on this long weekend. The one I was on was towing a sailboat that was loose in the basin, and the other 2 were right around Whiff and Spit. So all within our area here in Sooke.
I think it's a real necessity to have you out there, and I would like for our council to discuss having you as a line item for each budget year.
Thank you.
And not coming back all the time.
Councillor Pearson, please.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor Parkinson and Councillor Casper, and thank you for your presentation tonight, and for providing the service that you did. I had the opportunity to go to your open house the other day.
Oh, excellent!
And I've toured the facilities before, so I know kind of what you're doing, and it's that important thing that you hope you never need, but you're really glad if you ever do need it. So thank you, and I'd like to make. And to capitalize on what Councillor Parkinson said, I'd like you to, because you said you need some help or some direction. I don't know how much staff time we have available to help you with the process of approaching our neighbors, like for a collective thing. So I'd make a motion to have you work with somebody from staff, maybe from finance, that we could contact our neighbor, Mr. Hicks, and our neighbors in Metchosin to work together for a common funding. And I also would support a line item in the annual budget going forward. So
excellent.
So is that could I make that motion to work with somebody on staff? I don't want to give you too much work, Mr. CAO, through the chair to the CAO.
Well,
I'm easy to deal with, so.
Okay. Typically, the letters would come from council, like when we're looking at contacting other municipalities, so we would want their support. It would go from council to council, or mayor and council to the other mayor and council. So certainly we could create such a letter. I think it would be helpful, some of the details to provide is what is the annual funding amount that you'd be looking for, which municipalities really should we approach. I mean, if you're sort of in the Race Rocks to Port Renfrew area, then you can sort of guess, but it would just be helpful to know if you're called beyond over into the Sydney area, then of course then it expands who we would send something to. And then we can, I could work with staff to put a letter and to send it out. At the same time, though, I think we need to demonstrate some sort of initiative, like if we're dividing this out and it's like, okay, well, even though 70% of the calls are in our water, but we're only going to fund $500, but Chosen, you're going to fund $2,000. It's kind of strange, right? Like we have to look at it proportionately. So it would be helpful to know, okay, let's look at last year, these many incidents, whereabouts in the water, just so you have sort of something.
We map every incident, and we have really great statistics on those. So,
okay, so let's see. To arrange a meeting with the municipality of Sooke, Metchosin, Langford, call Wanda Fuca to discuss financial support for the Wanda Fuca Marine Search and Rescue. So is it a meeting then, or I think we would start with a letter.
Okay.
Creating a meeting like this, it'll take the rest of the year to get everybody together just with schedules. Councillor Pearson?
So my intent of my motion was to put a tactical plan together in behind the letter of intent, because you can put a letter of intent to all the municipalities you want and they'll move receipt like everyone else does. But an actual tactical plan to say, okay, this is what the funding requirement could be potentially, and then get to a meeting or something. That's what was my suggestion, working with the financial community or financial staff, so that it looks like something that's measurable and it's realistic. So.
And it has to be done in a way that it doesn't impede on, Oak Bay, Sydney, and other jurisdictions that have their own society and have their own lifeboat station. So that's why it has to be Metchosin, Colwood, Langford, Sooke.
Yep. Now it would help. So is this? I think this is a good starting point for the motion, Councillor Pearson. I do think it's helpful, though, to have a member of this council involved in this process and working with staff. So would you like to be that delegate? Okay. So let's that council direct staff, and then to approach the municipalities. And maybe at the very end something, and that Councillor Pearson will be our liaison for this initiative. Something like that? Are you comfortable with that?
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that would just help with follow through, and then at various events, Councillor Pearson will have the opportunity to talk to other representatives. This is what it's about. It's about the political support would be needed. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I don't support this. Of course I do. I just think it's stronger when other councillors are involved in it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you for seconding the motion. I'm speaking to it. We haven't seconded yet. Okay. Good. I think that would be good. It'll just make it stronger. I just can't be everywhere all the time. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. And you're very familiar with the waters, too.
I'll contact you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so is everybody comfortable with that? And then that'll give us some time. We would want to see something in the fall, though, so I know there's a bit of a time piece there, just so that as everyone begins their budget deliberations, then it can fold into that. And then that works sort of with the timelines that you had indicated earlier, as well as ours for budget. And going forward, it'll actually have the plan. Is that doable, Councillor Pearson?
Certainly.
Excellent. Okay.
And that's a separate thing beside the grant application?
In terms, we'll deal with this one first, okay? Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to call the question on this first part. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. So then you were looking for $10,500 for now, like for this budget year?
Whatever is available, that would help us out. We do have a shortfall this year, which
okay.
means we just train less, which I don't like.
Right,
but. Okay.
So this, the first motion then was to handle future budget years going forward. Council, we have dealt with the application in the 500. What would you like to do for this budget year at this point? Councillor Ray, there's a question. Then to Councillor Casper, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. At the last deliberation of this council, have the numbers changed? Because when you came back, when the presenter was here last time for the grant, there was no shortfall.
Yes.
So if you could just explain what changed. Thank you.
What changed is we have a professional accounting firm doing our books, and we had a turnover of people in our organization. So we ran the numbers again with the budget, and there's a over $3,000 shortfall already. And that budget still is based on assuming we get 70% of the grant money from the BC Gaming grant that we asked for. If you look at 2015, there's over $30,000 difference. So, next year, are we going to get $70,000? I don't know. I'm going to ask for everything from BC Gaming, but they might only give us $50,000. So that budget of a shortfall of around $3,000 is the minimum we're going to be short. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I have Councillor Casper, then Parkinson, then Loggins.
Well, I was prepared to make a motion that we approved $2,000 because it's an unknown, and we've basically closed off our budget. We have a contingency fund, but it's somewhat limited. And, there may be other people who need money too.
Okay.
But at least that's a start.
Yep, no, excellent.
So 2,000 has been moved and seconded by Councillor Casper and Pearson. Discussion on the 2,000. Councillor Loggins, please.
I'm just hesitant to do a motion on the fly like this because we have already discussed this for this budget season. So I would like to just get my head around why we didn't fund the full amount the last time, and then go back and I know that, thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Ray, because that was part of it, was the budget was not in shortfall. However, all the other organizations were also in the process of gaming applications and receiving their acceptance for that. So I like to see the process in our applications for funding, and I'm not comfortable with the motion without having that background information again.
Councillor, you're fine? Okay. Any further discussion on the motion then? This is to fund 2,000. It'll come from council contingency. Councillor Ray, please, then Berger.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. One of the things that I've advocated in both of my terms is not making these sort of decisions on the fly. And I certainly appreciate that you've come and that the opportunity is there to find some money. But I agree with Councillor Logan's. I'd like to be able to ask staff some questions or have some conversation. I just don't feel comfortable doing motions on the fly. I find often they come back to bite us. And so I have a difficulty just on the principle. I'm not taking away from what you're asking, but I do agree with Councillor Logan's. I'd like some time to take a look at your numbers and have any questions answered. So I won't be supporting the motion tonight, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't support the request at the next council meeting.
Okay.
Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. My comments are similar to Councillor Logan's in that I support wholeheartedly what you do, but for me it's a bit of a slippery slope when we've got lots of other grant applications that came forward, and if they don't achieve their max Graming Gant that they asked for as well, we're not going to be able to top everyone up. So I think it just sort of puts us in an awkward position that this has gone through the grant process. The grant committee made a determination. There's just been a few too many numbers sort of floating around, and I feel the same as Councillor Ray. Maybe when we get some salt, I mean, we started off with a $10,000 deficit, now we're down to roughly a $3,000 deficit. I think that maybe there just needs to be a bit of reworking. I just don't want to put us in a situation where we have half of our grant people coming back now saying sort of the similar thing, and we don't have the money to fund everybody. So I guess in a roundabout way, I support what you do, but I'm having a tough time supporting this motion without tangent information in front of me.
Any other comments from council? I have Councillor. Nope. It was seconded. Councillor Pearson had seconded the motion. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Casper.
So my reason for the 2,000, we've been told because they got an accountant to come in, and their deficit so far is $3,000. They have an anticipated deficit of $10,000. So I'm not a supporter of giving, the full $3,000, but I felt that $2,000 would be an amount based on the caseload. If 70% of the calls are Sooke related, then I guess maybe I could justify that being our share of the $3,000. So 2,000 is 2/3 in my mind. So that's how I'm looking at it. Mm-hmm. It's real simple arithmetic, and it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to support more money down the road, because I think everybody's got to find ways of saving money. So that's my reason for the 2,000.
Thank you. The budgeting is very dynamic based on calls, based on length of calls, based on right now the Spirit of Sooke is in Jenkins Marine, up on the ways getting repairs. Is it a $10,000 repair? Is it a $20,000 repair? And these are very dynamic things that we try to include in the budget to give it some kind of number. So those are just some of the things that we're up against, trying to present you the best budget we can, balanced. And that's why we had brought in professional accountants, because before it was done by volunteers, and there's things that lapsed and things that didn't get done on time, where I have more of a professional business approach to it. So the first thing I did, is being president of the society, was bring in a professional accounting firm so that we can give you solid numbers and there is no fluff.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Loggins, please.
Just to follow up on what I think was echoed from a few councillors, including myself, 2,000 may not be enough. Perhaps it's another amount, a higher amount that we would like to fund. We all support what you do, but the information just isn't there for me to make that decision tonight. Because if we can get money from other areas as well, we may be able to provide more than that. But I don't want to be making motion after motion throughout the year, giving little bits and pieces. So that's why we have the grant cycle process, and that's why I do appreciate that process. So I just wanted to explain that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
I would like to see you get funding this time, in that you have been very busy from what I've been reading, that you're out on the waters quite a bit, and I appreciate all that you do out there. And so I'm in full support of the $2,000.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? I'll support the request as well. I think that that'll raise their amount to $2,500 from the District of Sooke. And as Councillor Pearson goes out and meets with or connects with other councils, then I think he can share that this council has funded both this current year and in previous years, and that we recognize the value that you bring to our community. So I'll call the question on the motion, please. All those in favor? Opposed? I have Councillor Berger, Ray, and Loggins opposed. Okay, so
thank you very much.
That carries. Thank you very much for your time and for the work you do, and be safe on the water yourself. Councillor Berger?
Yeah, I just had one follow-up comment to Councillor Pearson. When you guys get together and you can come up with a hard number of where you feel that deficit would be, I would love to see in the letter that we're going to send what that deficit is, also asking for a shared revenue, and then a shared revenue of, or sorry, not revenue, shared payment of what that debt is. Then it can come back to this council. Then we'll have that hard number that the three of us were looking for. So we can help you out and get you through the year. But I'd like to see that be included in the work that you guys plan on doing to the other municipalities.
We can do our best. The hard number, I don't know if there will ever be a hard number. I don't know what the rest of the year is going to look like for call-outs, for fuel budget.
You'll have to just go with an average over previous years, and I'm sure Councillor Pearson can work on something that will satisfy. There is support for the organization around the table. It's just out of sync with the grant process. Anything further? I'd like to move on. Councillor Ray?
Yes, Your Worship. I do have another question that I hope can be answered. As part of the package that you'll be sharing with the other municipalities, you said 70% of them are in this area. Do you also track where the people and the people you've helped are from?
Yes, we record the boat name, the people's names, all the information we can get. That goes to the Coast Guard, to the head office for their statistics, so they can get their funding from the federal government.
Okay. The reason I make the comment is that often people say, well, it's in Sooke. But if if you're doing 70% of your work in Sooke and 2% of your events are from people who live in Sooke, I think it just makes a better package to sell to the other municipalities that it's their community residents.
I'll do my best to get you the most clear information.
Great. Thank you very much for attending this evening. Okay. So we'll move on into our agenda, please. Our next item is item 6, our public question and comment period. So this will be for any item on this evening's agenda except for the public hearing, as that has its own specific comment period. So I'd like to invite any member of the public forward for any item on the agenda except for the public hearing. And we would just require your name, your address, and if you could let us know which item you would like to speak to so we can have that ready for you.
John Broman, 7797 Manitou Road. Your zoning bylaw, duplex zones, I'd like to make a brief comment on it. I haven't been warmed up. I just heard this afternoon that duplex zones was going to be brought up. As you've seen me in the past, I'm very interested. I think I could help a little bit with organization of things. Mr. Haldane's brought up some good things. Yeah, a lot of it's to do with just you got to tweak partially your building code. We live by the BC building code, I think, is what we do, and the BC building code allows for separation of units, no common walls. Townhouse. I brought that up with the last mayor. We now have detached townhouse. In Langford, you have detached duplexes. It's under the BC building code. All you have to do is tweak your bylaw a little bit. When Herb says common wall or whatever, that should just get out of there. And just a duplex is a duplex, whether it's separate or two units on one property. your Strata Title Act, this is where we are really weak in Sooke. I've just gone through 2 subdivisions in Sooke here with my boys, and that was strata subdivisions. And it was an eye-opener for everybody. Even Rob, you've got a lot of experience with subdivisions, and you were even having difficulty with some of the new stuff that we bring in under the deal. When we first applied, both properties were side by side, and I fought tooth and nail to keep them separate, because they were separate, and the boys are separate identities, and we're applying for 3 lots on each property. The staff were struggling with it, especially your fire department. They wanted one road to go through from one subdivision into another. We couldn't do that under strata. So what your staff and everybody, yourselves and even us builders, we need a little bit of counseling with the professionals that register these stratas. And I use Island Survey, and I've talked to them before about it. Because we spent a lot of time going back and forth. I went to the surveyor, I come back to districts of Sooke, I talked to our boys, and it was difficult to pull everything together. And it was a simple little subdivision. So, but when you look at it now, it all worked out. It is affordable housing, and you're going to have a lot of strata. That's why the government's changed the Strata Act so much, to allow for simpler subdivisions. Sooke Road, 1 driveway in, rather than, Christ, if there was 40 units, in some of these stratas, you'd have 40 driveways if they were old system, we're all independent. So I talked to Island Survey, and they're more than willing to come out and sit with staff, and they can explain their end of it, what they have to see. Strata conversions, another one where the old houses are lived in, and then they go for a strata conversion on them. Basically, it's pretty simple stuff, but nobody really knows. We're all struggling here a little bit, and if with a little bit of tweaking, I think we can improve it a lot. And the time frame, it's so slow. Right now, I found going through simple little subdivisions and taking you over a year, and we never made no amendment to the community plan. And I really wish when I'm not amending the community plan or a developer, and we're applying for something, the process should be 6 times as fast. Just the community is already agreed to what you had in a footprint. So if we're following along the community plan and trying to develop within your guidelines of the plan, not amending it, there should be a fast process. And once you start doing that, some of these little simple things, you'll start seeing things move, in a simpler process, and make it affordable. It's been difficult here a little bit, but I think with a bit of tweaking, we can. That's all I'd like to suggest. I can put some time in with staff to try to talk to Island Survey and stuff, and if we have to report or get a little committee together and don't cost the taxpayer money. You start talking to lawyers, they're not the professional. They listen to the surveyors. The surveyors are the ones that actually do the the strata, so it meets the Strata Act. So.
Thank you, Mr. Broman. I appreciate your comments. Other members of the public for this evening's agenda? I'll call for a second time. Okay, seeing none, we'll move along into 7.1, please. Bylaw number 662-6978, West Coast Road Phase Development Agreement, Authorization, Repeal Bylaw. And I believe we made a change to move 8.3 forward, so we're going to work on bylaw number 671, zoning bylaw amendment 2455 Phillip Road, 6334 Riverstone Drive.
Your Worship, I think you moved 8.3 to be before 8.1.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading out.
But we're at 7.1 right now? The public hearing.
Oh, good grief. Okay. I was right the first time. Okay, thank you for listening, Ms. Rears. Okay, back to the West Coast Road Phase Development Agreement. I'll pass this over to staff if there is a staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Make sure I got the right one before we get going here. There was a report that was prepared, and it was a report summary, and it's attached to the public hearing document as well as it was read out at the May 8th meeting, but I'd just like to reiterate some of it. The owners of the properties located at 6978 and Lot B, West Coast Road, have requested that the agricultural land reserve buffer secured through two Section 219 covenants in the phase development agreement be reduced. The original agreement included a 15-meter wide buffer area. Included in this is an 8-meter no-cut zone, a 6-foot high solid fence along the north boundary, and a 2-meter berm, and then no structures permitted within the remaining 7-meter buffer area. And you can see the properties are up highlighted on the screen there. The applicant is proposing to keep the ALR buffer but reduce it. The proposal includes includes a 7.5 meter wide buffer area, a 2 meter wide hedge, a 6-foot high chain link fence along the north boundary, and no structures in the remainder of the buffer area will be permitted. In order to address this request, each covenant and the PDA need to be addressed. In order to uncomplicate the title of the properties, the applicant has asked that the two existing covenants be removed and the new proposed covenant would then replace them. The new covenant includes the proposed ALR buffer language and removes all redundant language from the previous covenants. Things like reference to old bylaws, things have already been completed, etc. To provide consistency, Council will also have to consider terminating the phase development agreement. Staff have been advised that since the issues are covered off in the new proposed covenant, the PDA becomes redundant and can be terminated. Each of the recommendations will need to be addressed in order to the applicant to achieve their proposal. Just before tonight's meeting, I was handed a supplement to the public hearing and the related bylaws from our acting corporate officer, and I'm not too sure at what point this would kick in for council's deliberation. So I'll turn it over to our acting corporate officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Mr. Howitt and the gallery. So there's been just an addition added into the motions that were proposed tonight. On the agenda, we had proposed third reading, but in fact, we can do fourth reading according to legislation. So we could do third reading and then adopt. And following adoption, because there's covenants that are involved in the PDA, that we'll have to release those covenants and then do a new Section 219 covenant as proposed, as Mr. Howitt explained.
Okay, so the whole lot could be done tonight at Council's will. Okay, Councillor Pearson.
I'll move third reading.
Sorry, we do need to go into a public hearing, though. And I just want to make one comment that was raised by a member of the public. In the notice, just in case this does arise at some point, the notice that went into publication, there was a typo. So the bylaw says 6978, but the civic address in the notice, and this is on page 2 of the blue, is 6798. So it's just the transposition of numbers there. So staff did verify that this is fine to proceed because the legal description loaded below is completely correct, and also 6798 doesn't exist as an address. So just in the event that something were to arise, we are fine to proceed, because otherwise there was a concern that we would have to re-advertise and that would cause unnecessary delay. So if you are queried, that has been checked, verified, we're good to go. Okay? So are there any other questions from council to staff on this matter? Okay, so then I'll read out and we'll commence the public hearing on this. So before we do so, there is a statement for myself to read. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submissions received to date are available. It is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak, please at the appropriate time commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and home address. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone who deems his or her interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views known. Please note that this hearing forms part of the regular council meeting and as such is being video recorded. Videos and their contexts, including any personal information disclosed during the public hearing, will be posted on the district website. So on that note, I'd like to welcome any members forward to speak on 6978 West Coast Road. And sir, if you could just turn on the microphone. Thank you. Yes.
012. My name is Richard Kovacic. I am a resident of 6978 West Coast Road. I sat here back in February 2013, on the 12th of February, and I have the minutes of the meeting here on my phone, where we spoke about a solid fence being placed between the two properties and also the runoff from their proposed building development and everything else. I'm just a bit concerned because I'm hearing the readings now that they wish to swap the solid fence on the north side of the property, which is up against the ARL land, for a chain link fence. So does that now mean that they can change the one between the two properties? That's concern number one. Concern number two is that there are trees which straddle the property line between ours, which is actually a strata, there are 4 homes there, and the proposed building development. So I want to know if the trees are going to come down because they're sitting on the property line. And my other last and final concern is now that they're removing the buffer, they can actually go back there with excavators and start digging and moving soil around. Now my concern is that it's just cost me over $3,000 to have my house cleaned. That's because I live near ARL land and dust and dirt. So when they start the development, there are a number of other properties along our strata which is going to get covered in dust and dirt because the wind blows off of their lot directly onto our property. So they are my concerns. I just want them noted and for your thoughts.
Okay, perhaps I can get an answer just from staff on if they know about the fence and the trees and any dust control measures that could be taken.
I'm not the fence that the member of the public was alluding to between the two properties, I believe, was a condition of the development permit, and it would continue to be so if that's the case. I don't have that portion of the file, but I believe it was. Also, during the subdivision process, I can work with the proponent on dealing with that issue. As far as the removal of the trees between the properties, if the trees are actually on the property being developed, the developer could take the trees down. As far as the dust control, I can also work with the applicant or whoever who is going to do the subdivision with regards to making sure that dust control is provided as development goes on.
Okay, so what happens if the tree, like in 3 of the cases, actually straddles the property line between ours and theirs?
Then I would suggest that the developer or the owner of the property at the time would be remiss if he tries to take the trees down.
Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Howe?
I think the owner would be remiss to taking the trees down if they actually straddle the property line without consent of the other party.
Right. So if it does share the property line, then they would need to talk to the neighbors to work.
That's correct.
That
It would have to
okay.
be. There would have to be mutual agreement. Right.
Mutual agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, simple as that. Do I?
Sure. If you do have any questions as it goes on, please feel free to contact our staff at any time. Okay? Thank you. Do I have other members of the public to speak on this public hearing?
Herb Haldane, 3118C, Otter Point Road. So I guess my concern, and I might have bridged it a little bit earlier in the 6 o'clock meeting, but if you take into consideration that Silver Spray has almost 50% ALR on its borders, there's no fences, there's no setback, there's no buffer zone of any kind, there was no requirement for one. Sun River has 5 ALR components to it, not a single buffer, not a single fence, nothing in their requirements. And actually they even have a DP area right now to do a gated community, multifamily, whatever that's in the process, no requirements of that. Grant Road has a couple of subdivisions on right now, border on ALR land, no requirement whatsoever. As a matter of fact, this is the only zone we've ever required a buffer zone out of any subdivision we've ever done in the history of Sooke since 1999. And we've asked them to do 15-meter setbacks, fences, buffers, all this stuff, and dust control or whatever is all a component of any subdivision. Tatangi's doing a brand new subdivision component right now, right up near the Poye School, buffers onto a 120-acre piece of ALR land, no requirement again. So we could go on about how many we haven't done it on. So this is the only one we've ever done it on, and we're just trying to get them to a point where they can actually get the subdivision off the ground, make it work. Parking's an issue, road sizes are an issue, or whatever. I totally understand where neighbors come from. It's up to the point where every brand new subdivision in Sooke is on dirt and creates dust and land or whatever. Maybe there should be a requirement in some procedure bylaw somewhere for cleaning or whatever. Maybe we could incorporate that down the road, but we don't have anything in place at this point. And one operation shouldn't be held responsible and all the other operations are not. So if we want fairness and understanding from all developers publicly, we have to create a system that's equitable and even for everybody. And some of the biggest developments in Sooke have absolutely nothing. So these little tiny one-offs shouldn't be required to do a whole bunch more than the big guys do. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane. Other members of the public?
As the applicant,
sorry, can we get your name, please?
Yep, as Michael Volk, 4923 Townsend Drive in Saanich, and I am the applicant on this file. So Herb said it well. This property has been held ransom for a couple of years now because of these covenants, and it's been horrendous for my client. So as a business, I have iView project development, and I work on properties like Viewpoint Estates, and that's going great, and thank you very much for all the help there. This, however, is what I'm doing as a real estate agent for some guys that are friends of mine that got messed up in this a couple of years ago. And they asked me to sell the property for them, and I couldn't, and then it was because of the covenants. So now I've finally, after a year of struggling, got these covenants removed, and I realize now that the development, the phase development agreement will be coming off with it, which from what I understand means the development permit will not be valid anymore. So now we have a PLA coming when the covenant's removed, from what I understand. But now the development permit, I guess, will be another process, which will again tie up this project for, I don't know how long, for the people. All these guys want to do is sell the land and move on. Yeah, there's a couple guys that owned it. It just got tiresome and old, and they just want to move on. The guy that wants to buy the property wants to develop it. He doesn't want to buy it without a development permit and a PLA for a very reasonable subdivision that's frankly a better plan than the last one and less lots. So my lawyer, Pat Trelawney, that has been involved in this with me because it's been very complex, had suggested that the development permit could, because it is for more lots, could run with this file and stay in force in effect, and the lots could be sold separately because it's 2 lots. It's lot B and lot 1, I think it is. So what I'm asking council is if you can also help me, or help them rather, consider allowing this to proceed with the existing development permit that's in place. And that's all I'm asking. So.
Okay, Councillor Casper.
Well, I have a question. Normally, I don't ask
Sure.
presenter questions. No,
He's
I'm not.
He can ask
I'm just
questions
asking questions.
of the speaker. He just can't debate it.
Did your lawyer, did somebody look at the fact that development permits do not cover density, and they only cover form and character, landscaping, and other such matters?
Well, sure. I'm sorry.
So I would just hope that those matters were looked at or discussed, because I'm kind of flabbergasted. So
You're flabbergasted about the fact that a development permit's required? So am I. But it's a DP area. I've been through this before on Viewpoint Estates when I had to do a development permit for form and character on vacant land. But I did it. And that's a great topic for another day, I think, because development permits for vacant land don't make a lot of sense. So I would love it if that could be dealt with here as well. As far as your thing for the Coast Guard or whatever that was, the guys.
Yeah, but you need to speak to the public hearing. That
I was
the
gonna say,
Coast Guard is.
I was going to say I'll talk to Kevin about it. We were going to kick in some.
Deal with that.
Yeah,
contact Councillor Pearson. That does just fall outside the public hearing, but I appreciate the community support anyway. Okay, other speakers in regards to the public hearing that's being presented. I'll call for a second time if there's any speakers. A third and final time for any speakers. Seeing none, I will close public hearing and return back to council, please. There is a suite of motions that has been proposed by our corporate officer as outlined in how things can be handled this evening. Question from Councillor Pearson.
Okay. I'll move the recommended action for item number 1. Council will grant third reading to 6978 West Coast Road Development Agreement Authorization. I'm trying to make sure that this is the repeal piece of this. Is that what I'm looking at? Just repeal? Just like I see that development agreement. So we're taking off the covenants on that property as a result of item number 1.
No, this is just third reading. The other piece comes later in terms of covenant renewal.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct, Your Worship. After the repeal has been adopted, then you can remove the covenants.
Okay, so I just...
Can I have a seconder, please, for the motion? Yes. Seconded by Councillor Loggins. Okay, speaking to it.
Yeah, so I just want to ask the question then, because the wording, through Your Worship, to our corporate officer, so the wording says that Council grant third reading phase West Coast Phase Development Agreement Authorization Repeal. Okay, I got it. I saw it was missing the word repeal. I should have put my glasses on. Got it. I'm good.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Are there questions? Councillor Ray, question?
Yes, Your Worship. I guess I'm just trying in terms of procedure. One of the can I still ask a question at some point
Well, what we can do, because we do have a live motion, so we can call that, and then I can go back to you for a question that's unrelated to the motion, if you like.
Yes.
Okay, so any questions on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Ray, you had a question.
I did have a question, and it's just to speak to the comment that was made about the requirement of this 6-foot-high fence along the northern part of the ALR. And I guess I need for my own mind, if we're going to be making that as part of another covenant, is why it has to happen on this piece of property and we don't have it on others. I mean, I know there is one on Sun River, and the new one, because I've seen it, but elsewhere in Sun River there isn't any fences.
Okay, question back to staff.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ray, the original setback and tree and fence requirement was a condition of council for the rezoning. The applicant came a year ago or 18 months ago and made a presentation that he wanted the area reduced for the setback, the fence reduced, the tree planting reduced, etc., which council agreed to work with staff from that perspective. We haven't been asking or requiring for buffers other than Sun River. There was a buffer requirement, but that was a condition of the ALC approval at the time. The ALC itself came out with a policy with regards to farm practices and the setbacks and covenants and green buffer spaces, but it's only a guideline. Staff review developments that are adjacent to farmland, and we consider whether these setbacks are necessary. But as I said, this one was a condition of council for the rezoning itself. It wasn't a staff initiation on this one.
A follow-up question. I think it was mentioned here that they were before us back here in 2013, and so it's now 2017. I guess for me, I just think this is an example of something that seems, in my opinion anyhow, seems to have gone sideways over time. And I guess from where I said, I'd like to see it resolved in a manner that is seen as being fair. So I look to staff's help and guiding to make sure that occurs for this application.
If I may, Your Worship, a lot of these things that we do with applicants, we ensure that they have direction from us, specifically with regards to how to get things done. We don't control how fast they get things done. This particular application came back before council before my time, and the issue of the setback requirement was reviewed at that time as well. So this is the second time around for this one. And from the last time that the applicant came forward, it took over almost a year to come back with the amended documents that we required.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson?
Well, I guess my question is, I hope it doesn't take a year, because we're trying to take things off to move this process along. So that's the goal of this motion tonight, is to move this project along. So that, because we're in desperate need of some building lots in Sooke right now, so we've got to make these projects streamlined the best we can. This is a project that's been sitting here for a long time and tied up with people. How this covenant got on there, I mean, we could debate that all night, and it was, I think we've heard enough tonight that I don't like covenants like this, because it singles out a single piece of property, but we're at where we're at. So.
Okay, so the next recommended action then is that council adopts 6978 West Coast Road Phase Development Agreement Authorization Repeal Bylaw number 662-461-1. Yes, with no, we've already did third reading. This is adoption. We haven't done that yet. Would someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any questions on the adoption piece? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And then there's this third item. As it's presented by staff. So we're seeing some amendments. Remainder of the buffer being lawn or garden, no structures. Okay, so that's in the buffer area. Questions on this, or would someone like to move the recommended action? Councillor Pearson? Microphone.
I don't know, okay, because I'm going to say, I don't know if we can take all of that out and throw it out right now, can we? At this reading?
I'm sorry?
Well, okay. So we're going to get rid of all those covenants, like reading this motion, split it in half. Okay,
all those, there's 1, 2, 3,
those covenants there.
4 are gone.
I'd like to see no covenants. The replacement from anything below that.
And so no buffer, no fence, no hedge, and then the last point doesn't apply.
Well, we haven't done it to anybody else, and that was my point 3 meetings ago, was that we haven't done this, and we've got rid of a buffer, then we get rid of a thing, now we got a 2-meter hedge. How, I don't know. I think all of that's redundant. But anyways, I'll make the motion. I'll split it in half, that we remove, and I'll wait to hear some other things, that we remove those covenants off the land.
Okay, so that would be the 4 there that are listed.
That's it.
Okay, so we'll start with that. Approve the release of the following covenants associated with the property, and there's 4 listed there. So that's been moved by Councillor Pearson. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Berger. Any discussion on the release of the covenants? Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. Just following up with what Councillor Pearson just said and just information that I'm sort of hearing tonight. If we have other, and we've got lots of other ALR and ALC sort of lands within the municipality, and I'm trying to think if on my term on council, this is the only one that I can remember as well.
But right now the motion is to release the covenants, so we can. Are you
well? That's what I'm
speaking
speaking about. Like,
okay.
this is why I agree to release them, because I can't recollect us having that requirement, and all I can think about when we require setbacks, and I'm going to just give myself a little bit of talk out loud here, is that when we did a residential. We had a residential backed up against industrial property, and all the onus for the buffer and the setback fell upon the industrial property owner. So to me, that says all the onus of the ALR owner should provide the buffer, because the residential fellow for industrial didn't have to do anything. So again, just talking out loud, maybe that's why I can't recollect that we would ever require any sort of buffer on a residence, because it's the person that owns the ALR that should be providing their own buffer, just as we do with industrial. So as I'm talking out loud, I totally support getting rid of the covenants.
Okay, any further discussion on the release of the covenants? All right, I'll call the question on releasing the covenants. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Okay, so that brings us to the other, and as we heard from staff, the items that were brought forward and what we see here were a result of the rezoning at the time. Is that, or the increased density?
Your Worship, the original setbacks from the ALR boundary was a condition of council through the rezoning process.
Okay.
What you see here was an offer from the proponent back a year ago. And at that point in time, council instructed staff to work with the proponent to prepare the documents as you see today.
Okay. Can we get the recommendation up just so that we have it for discussion, and then I'll go to Councillor Casper, then Ray, please. Go ahead, Councillor Casper. Just get that the text up, please.
I'm just going by recollection, but it's my understanding that the rear yard setback for a dwelling unit is 7.5 meters in this zone. I could be corrected. And I'm assuming that all of these properties are going to be, this is where the rear of the property is, or where the units are. Now, if it's side yard, well then, there may be a bit of a problem. So it might be redundant to even have mention of a 7.5 meter wide buffer. Because if our zoning bylaw doesn't permit something to be built that close to the property line, anyhow, then it doesn't matter. So you don't have to put it in a covenant. But if it's a side yard situation, that's a different story. And it may have an impact that unwittingly has been created. The other thing is, I do agree with Councillor Pearson's remarks that I would think that somebody who's doing the development would want to have some level of fencing between their property and the neighbor's property. So, but to me that's common sense, and why would we have to legislate it? And by doing a covenant, we are in essence legislating it. To have a 2 meter wide hedge when you already got a fence, is that to cover the fence so nobody sees a chain link fence? And I don't know if that's the right way, because in some respects the hedge would be nicer than the chain link fence. So to me, I don't think both are required. And then it says the remainder of the buffer would be lawn or garden. Well, you know what? I'm going to rely on the people who are going to buy the property. If they want patio stone, if they want grass, if they want a garden, that's their choice. But again, here we are, and this is our decision here. So I'm talking to us. That why would we want to dictate whether somebody had lawn or a garden? Like, who in the heck are we? You know, quite frankly, I think it's gone a little overboard. And you know what? I'm the first to admit it. And I'm probably one of the sad saps who helped vote for this thing originally. And I hate admitting to that. Herb, correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's direct the council, keep the comments
but anyway,
to council.
I just think that by adding all this other stuff, if we don't legally have to do it, then why bother? Because I tell you something, we're not saving ourselves from some ALR land. And to me, this is creating a huge barrier between residential property owners and ALR land. And I don't think it's needed. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'm just looking at what was originally proposed and where it's now. Like at that time, I can see that someone is compromised here, likely the applicant, because at that time it said a 6-foot-high solid green fence. And now it's the case, it's a chain link fence with the 2-meter wide hedge. So the 2-meter wide hedge would obviously grow and be taller. The chain link fence is probably to prevent the deer from eating it as it's growing. And then, so that could be why that would be an improvement. Eventually the hedge would cover off the fencing, but you do need to have some deer control. If there's ALR, there could be animals that would eat whatever's there. But I see your point. Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm not in favor of making the next suggested motion at all. So I mean, procedurally, I don't think we have to do anything with it. As I said previously, any buffers are a requirement of the person that owns the ALR land. Okay. And I did a quick little Google search of the ALC and ALR, and they're required to supply their own buffers if they're against residential or industrial or any other part. So for me, our zone takes care of any lot line, any setbacks, any heights. Whatever zone this goes with this property already speaks to everything you can and can't do with it. So I don't know why we would impose anything else when ALR buffers belong to the owner of ALR land. This zone already has everything laid out in the zoning bylaw.
Okay. Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the reason that this has come forward, and this would be to the Director of Development Services, is because the council a number of years ago required it. So it's coming forward because of that determination. So we're well within our ability to remove it.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ray, yes.
Thank you.
We've already removed it.
Okay, so then getting back to one of the comments by a neighboring resident, though, in terms of the side, because this deals only with the north end of the property, but in terms of the side fencing that separates the lands, how would that be addressed? That's not even mentioned in the covenant.
Your Worship, I believe through the development permit requirement, there was a requirement for fencing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't come with that part of the file tonight, but I believe it was.
Okay. All right, so at this point, council, then there's you can either move this or not do anything, in which case the covenants come off and then there is no new covenant added, but I don't think I think that would conclude this anyway. So I just don't want there to be a loose end that appears in a few months that stops this moving forward because council didn't do something at the time. So I'm sensing around the table that there's no appetite to proceed with a new covenant. So can I just be clear then that things will just roll and the developer can move ahead, and I just don't want to be seeing this paperwork again? I don't think anyone else does either.
Your Worship, if it's council's deliberation tonight not to impose the new covenants, once that goes through and it's solidified, then we can work with the proponent to get going on the subdivision component of this development.
Okay. Okay. Anything else from council then? Anyone wants to move the motion? Nope. Seeing none? Okay, then I guess that concludes this matter then. Okay. Thank you everyone for your patience. So now we will move into bylaw into our bylaw section. So item 8.3, Bylaw number 671, zoning amendment bylaw 2455 Phillips Road 6334 Riverstone Drive 600-38. And I believe this will start with the staff presentation, and Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. I just need to declare conflict with this agenda item as my husband is a subcontractor for Cedar Construction. They're the general contractors that oversees and does all the building for Sunriver Development.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Berger. We will, don't go too far, I suppose, but we'll find you after the matter's done. Okay? Turning over to our planner, please. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. This rezoning application is to amend the shown highlighted area in the Sunriver Estates Comprehensive Development Zone from Area A, multifamily residential, to Area F, small lot, single-family residential. This application is also to reduce the density requirements for Sunriver multifamily residential from 100 units to 44 units. This change requires an amendment to Section 802.7 in the Sunriver CD Zone and to Section 2.1G of the Sunriver Land Development Agreement. The map on the screen shows the different zoning areas in Sunriver. The red is the multifamily areas, and the brown is small lot single family. There are currently 14 small lot, single-family lots existing in Sunriver at the moment. The red area that is circled with highlighted wording is the area subject to the zoning amendment. After review of the official community plan, allowing these smaller lot sizes for single-family is supported, and no concerns have been received from referral agencies, and the applicant is here at the meeting tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so by changing this to the small lot, it will allow for the development to proceed with lots like the other small lot that we have, which would also include ranchers then, hopefully, as well.
That is correct.
Okay. Questions from members of council to staff? Go ahead, Councillor Casper.
So my question is, how many units will be built? 44. And will those units have suites as permitted in our small lot zone?
The new small lot that he will be proposing can have 400 square meters in size, but to have a suite, the lot would have to be at least 550 square meters, and it would be a suite within the house, so that would be permitted within the zone.
So my further question through you, Your Honor, is are there any lots that meet that requirement or could meet that requirement to have a suite?
In this area to be rezoned, the lots haven't been created yet.
Right, but that's a minimum lot size. But if there was in a subdivision plan a larger lot size, then they, in theory, could have a suite, unless it's clearly defined that that zone does not permit suites.
That's correct, as long as it meets the lot size requirements.
Okay, so we don't know if there's going to be lots that are larger than what's laid out or proposed at this time, do we?
The subdivision plan hasn't been applied for yet.
Right. So my only concern is this, is that in the original agreement for all of Sunriver, it mentions the number of lots and it says units, lots or units. So a suite could be considered a unit, and that's a dwelling unit. And so then you've got the principal unit, which is the house. So, and that I'm looking at it only from the sewer capacity that was agreed to and what was established. So I just don't want to find us in a situation where there inadvertently is an increase in density that we may or may not know about, which puts demands on our system. So those are my technical concerns.
Through your worship, staff and the developer are keeping track of the density that's occurring on the site. in regards to the maximum allowed.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you. So I'm just a little confused then, because in the report, it says the minimum lot size for small lot in the subzone area F, which is what I assume, what I take is what we're moving it to, is 400 square meters. So if that's minimum. Sorry, my apologies. I was thinking maximum. Now I understand your comment, Councillor Casper.
Okay, Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, through the chair to our planner. Thanks, Ms. Johnson, for your presentation. So going back to the mathematics, so it's going to change it from 100 units to 44, correct?
Through the chair, yeah, the multifamily will be reduced to 44 units.
Okay. So then by mathematics, the maximum, even if there were suites in there, would be 88. Is that correct? Is that right?
If the lots, it wouldn't allow for that, but hypothetically, yes, 88.
Okay, and I just say hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
So we're within our sewer capacity. Is that?
Through the chair, for suites, we're talking about the single family.
Mm-hmm.
The 44 is in reference to multifamily units.
Okay.
So originally the developer had to build 100 multifamily units. So that's a duplex or townhouses and stuff like that. The developer is seeing single family homes as more desirable in Sooke, so is looking to reduce the multifamily unit requirement to just 44 for the whole site. So currently there's 38 or 32 existing right now, and that's at the point.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So mathematically, then my question still is we're well within our sewer capacity.
That's correct, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Pearson, we are well within the realm of our the sewer charge.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? I support this moving forward. The area that the small lot area in the subdivision has been very popular. It does have small ranchers on it that are very appealing and that are very needed for accessibility and for seniors in our community. And so I'd like to see this go ahead. There is a suggested recommendation here in the report, and that is to give first and second reading. So first, okay, so Councillor Parkinson has moved first reading. Can they be done together? Okay, first and second reading together to the zoning amendment bylaw, and that's been moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Loggins. Any discussion on first and second reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's motion's carried. And then the other then is that a public hearing be scheduled for zoning amendment bylaw number 671 and for the modification. Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Ray. Any discussion on the public hearing and modification agreement to the covenant? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Great. Okay, if we could please have Councillor Berger returned, and thank you very much, Ms. Johnson, for the presentation. I'll just wait for Councillor Berger, and then we will move into bylaw number 665, zoning amendment bylaw for 6671 Wadams Way. Okay, Council, as you know, the initial public hearing to zone the Wadams property to CTC did not pass through Council. Instead, there was a desire by majority of Council to move to a P2 community facility zone on the lands that the district holds. So that's where we are at right now. This has been solely driven by Council and not so much by staff, so that's why you won't see much in terms of a staff report. So I'll just put this back to Council then if you have any questions. Otherwise, there is a recommendation and they're grouped together there so we can do first and second reading together. Okay, so we have first and second reading moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Questions on the motion, and that is to rezone Wadams Way from R1 to P2. No questions then? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? I have Councillor Pearson opposed. And the next part then is that a public hearing be scheduled for zoning amendment bylaw 665, moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Loggins. Any discussion on scheduling the public hearing? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Okay, it's carried unanimously. Okay, we're moving on to bylaw number 8.2, bylaw number 668. Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Amendment 147-31, proposed boundary adjustment for 2295 Phillips Road. Is there a staff report with this? Or Mr. Howard, will you speak to this?
Thank you, Your Honor. Unfortunately, there was no, there's a plan attached to the staff report, but there was no fancy pictures to be putting up on the screen, so I'll just go through the report quickly. This 0.164 hectare lot is bordered by the Sun River Nature Park, Sooke River, and Phillips Road, and a private residence. The current rural RU2 zoning on this property would permit the construction of a single-family dwelling, one single-family dwelling suite, or one duplex. The property is immediately adjacent to the sewer specified area boundary at Sun River Estates. The applicant advises that the property has been owned by his family since 1952 and has remained undeveloped since that time. The applicant has indicated that allowing the property to connect to the municipal sanitary sewer system would allow for construction on the lot under the RU2 zone while protecting the riparian aquatic values of the Sooke River. The property is located within the community growth area as identified by the Sooke official community plan and its long-term goal to provide sanitary service to all properties within the CGA. Policy 11.5, the Sooke Core Area Local Services Area Boundary Policy permits council to consider applications from individual property owners for inclusion into the sewer service area. Should council proceed with the bylaw process, the requirements of policy 11.5 as well as bylaw 281, the Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Mandatory Connection bylaw 2006 and bylaw 150, the Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Cost Recovery would also be addressed. The property has been included in the sewer districts model with our engineering provider reporting that there's sufficient capacity in the existing infrastructure to accommodate the flows from the existing residential lot. That's the staff report. I'd be more than happy to answer questions.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Howard, for the presentation. I have no individual opposition to this application, but what I have a question is that some time ago, I think 3 months ago, we asked for a report on hooking up to the sewer specified area and the costs that would be associated with it. Because again, this is going to reflect the current connection fees, and the motion that I made some time ago was to look at the sewer expansion bylaw and connection fee schedule. So I guess before we moved ahead with this, because this is the first one, I'd like to know what our status through the staff or through the chair to the staff, what the status of that bylaw is that I would like to have come back.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, we've talked about getting a report together as you specified, but until such time that we know through the OCP process where we're going with growth, it makes it a little bit difficult for us to put a comprehensive package together for council for their deliberation.
And I understand that that's linked to it, but I think that if we're going to hook up a single lot, we should have a fee schedule for somebody that's hooked up to a system that's been paid for by everybody else in the district for 10 years now, I think 2006 to 2007, so 11 years. And we've been all paying $550, the lots have all been paying $550 per year. So that I think that connecting or expanding our sewer specified area, as my bylaws said, or the proposal, we should capture that, because I don't think that's related to the OCP. In my opinion, is that if one more lot comes in, they should pay. So and I understand the linkage, what you're explaining through there, but I think that the bylaw I was asking for, or to be considered by staff, was a simply catching up. Thank you.
That's probably what you're referring to, is just updating the fees bylaw,
Yes,
so
exactly.
that it has it's taken some sort of inflationary even aspect into consideration. Councillor Casper?
So, just from a procedural side, depending when Councillor Pearson made the motion and Council approved it, this application was probably in stream. It says March 29th. And, the thrust of revamping the fee schedule, as Councillor Pearson outlined, is that right now us charging somebody $2,700 was based on old numbers when the system was built. And that was done as a pay or buy into a system that was being funded by everybody else. That was the rationale for those numbers. I know Councillor Parkinson and I were on council at the time when this type of issue was being discussed, because we did allow expansions, but it was adjacent expansions. And right now, we're losing money. We could be collecting, my estimation, $6,000 per unit that is going to be given a building permit, or per lot that is created as a result of these connections and inclusions. Because right now, it's only one fee for the lot. That lot can be subdivided. There's no further buy-in fee for the next lot. They're already included. And to me, that's the discrepancy. And that's the problem that we're going to face, because it's a shortfall in long-term revenues that go into our system. It's a way to recapture. But I think there's a huge principle here. Everybody else has been paying for the system. We've been giving it away at half the value or cost, and that's not right. Now, I'm prepared to support this on the undertaking that there is a freeze. No more applicants, no more inclusions until that bylaw is updated, because we're going to nickel and dime, and really a motion was made by council to make this happen, and it should happen. It's dollars and cents, it's financial. And I look at our CAO, who's the director of finance, and I know he is concerned about money every day. So,
Okay, Mr. Blackwell?
Yes, Your Worship. We can certainly bring the fees bylaw back with an amendment to increase that fee by a $552 amount, since, and make sure it captures then on a scale that each year it's going to increase by another $552.
Yeah, I think
that's the intention. I think
that was the discussion at the time. So I think it's timely to bring them back. But I do want to focus on the matter at hand. Councillor Parkinson.
So I was going to suggest that we table the motion until we have the fee, and then put it forward. Because, like you say, if you can subdivide it, they're going to be adding more onto it, and we will be losing all of that. So I think that it should be tabled.
Councillor Pearson?
I would make a motion that we support this going in, but that the applicant understand is that it's in process, because we have a bylaw and a fee schedule that may come out as a result of that motion, that they would be willing to pay that catch-up fee. I don't know if can we do that?
Why wouldn't you table?
If I may, Your Worship, the fee, it's not a legal charge until it's an approved bylaw. So,
okay.
Councillor Ray, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support moving forward with this. I don't think it should be the applicant paying because we haven't been able to get it done. This isn't the first time this has been raised at this council table. It was raised a couple of years ago. So I'm hoping that this will be the last one, and then and have it approved. But I just don't agree for one piece of property coming through at this time to take it off the books.
Would you like to move the motion then?
I'll move the motion.
Okay, so that's the first part then, that council received the petition for local service, area service for the property located, as stated. That's been moved and seconded by Councillor Ray and Casper. Discussion on receiving the petition. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And then we can do first, second, and third reading to the Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Amendment Bylaw. Would someone like to move first, second, and third in a block? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ray. Any discussion on the readings? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, and if we could please see the fees bylaw at the next meeting, Councillor Ray.
Yes, Your Worship. Would it be timely then at this point to move a motion that we not accept any further applications for the purpose of joining in on the sewer specified area until the new bylaw is approved?
That's up to council to decide. Okay, so council has moved that no further petitions be received until the fees bylaw has been updated.
Yes.
That's been moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Casper. I'm hesitant in supporting this motion. I recognize that this is something that we want to do to bring the fees into compliance with what our current expectations are, but at the same time, we're also wanting to move things along, and we're hearing, of the high pace that's out there, and to keep that up. So it's one of those things where now anyone that does want to do something has to wait because council has a bylaw that has to go through several readings. So I suppose I have questions back to staff. So that'll be like over the course, in theory, I suppose, June, the first meeting in June. What will it take? 2 meetings to have the fee?
Yeah, if I may, Your Worship. I think staff misinterpreted what was really being asked for back then, because amending a fees bylaw for staff report isn't going to take any time at all.
Right, okay.
So, yeah.
But it would span 2 meetings, right? It would take one meeting to do the first and then the second for like a public hearing and adoption together? Do we need to do that?
Prefer our Deputy Corporate Officer answer that.
Okay, I just want to know how many meetings it would take to our Corporate Officer, please. How many meetings would it take to amend a fee bylaw? Would it all be done in 1 or 2? Sorry, Ms. Rears, did you catch my question?
Yes, I did, Your Worship. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if it requires a public hearing. If it requires a public hearing, it would be 3 meetings. If not, just 2.
Okay, so 2, maybe 3. So 3 would put us right into July, so that's a month and a half. Council obviously is comfortable with that, freezing everything for a month and a half. I see the point. I just struggle with it. Councillor Ray?
Yes, Your Worship. I have no problem coming in for a special meeting to speed it up. So have the meeting, if it does require a public hearing, then it's 2 weeks hence, do the public meeting, and then I have no problem coming in for a special meeting to move it along.
Councillor Pearson?
Okay, so we've got a motion, the specified. Okay, so you've got that on hold, and the bylaw itself to come back to staff. I think I'll wait and I'll comment after because we'll talk about this first.
I think there's just a change though. Let's see here. That council implement a hold on receiving further petitions for local area service for Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Amendments until the fees bylaw has been amended, I think, right?
Yep.
Okay. That's good with both the mover and the seconder. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the hold? Opposed? I'm opposed to this. That's okay. We don't always agree. That's what democracy lives. All right. Moving along, please. Okay. We are into our reports requiring action. 9.1, a multi-purpose tractor purchase. And there was a staff report with this. We did receive a number of quotes as well as some feedback from staff on the tractor and why a specific model has been selected and what it will be used for going forward. Recommendation's been moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Casper. So that is for the Island Tractor and Supply 59065. Questions, Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you to staff, just wondering, looking under the budget financial impact portion of the report, we approved a purchase of a truck, I believe, last meeting. So I'm just wanting, for just my own clarity, that we're within that $138,000 budgeted.
Okay.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Berger, yes, we are.
Any further questions on the tractor? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 9.2, Road Rehabilitation Projects 2017. There's a very thorough report here. I appreciate all the images so that we can see the condition as well as anyone that's following along with our reports. 9.2 is road rehabilitation projects. Interesting, the print version. Okay, so can we go with the road rehabilitation projects? So, as I've already introduced it. Okay. So questions for staff? Or did you have something further to add other than what was provided, Mr. Howard?
Your Worship, all I was wanting to do was to put the information out there, and I would field questions as considered by council. I think that we've done a fairly good narrative job on this to give you an indication on how bad our roads are actually getting. And what we'd like to do is, while we're waiting for the engineering, the high-level engineering report for the condition report, so we can have a 5, 10-year, 2, 5, and 10-year program. We're looking at roads that need doing something to them right now, where we're not going to have roads to pave. And what this allows us to do is put an RFP out there to get an understanding and a costing of what these roads might cost to rehabilitate. And then once we get that RFP back, I would like to come back to council, give the information and get direction whether you want to proceed with remediating these roads. Because as I said just a second ago, and as I reiterated in this report, if we don't do something this year, we're going to lose the roads, and it's going to cost us a considerable amount more in the following year to do something with those roads. So I just leave that for your consideration, and I'll take the questions. Councillor Pearson, thank you.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Howard, and I think you've hit, some of the highlights or lowlights, maybe as it would be a better way to describe it. So I appreciate the list, and I'll move the recommended action. And now we have come. Yes. So one of my former lives, I used to work for Department of Highways, and what was always important to the Department of Highways was the shouldering piece of the road, like getting the gravel up against the thing. So, and I recognize that Highway 14 isn't in our bailiwick, but I noticed west of Sooke, like west of Grant Road, that there's severe ditches, and I just want to use the opportunity for you to pass that on to our friends at Main Road, because there's the shoulders are cracking away, the pavement's cracking away quite a bit long by Butler's Beach and things like that. The ditches are about this deep, right up against the pavement, and Highway 14 is going to be lost as well if some Department of Highways or whoever does it now, Main Road Construction, doesn't shoulder those roads. So that used to be always one of Mr. Smokey Stoltz's requirements, was to shoulder those roads up, because it keeps the water away from the edge. So I'd like to also look at a list of inside the district, what we are responsible for, some of that shouldering as well. So.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, the high-level report that we will be expecting or should be getting in August will relay all that as well, and give a list and an indexing of when shouldering needs to be done on a 2, 5, and 10-year program.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Loggins, please. Oops.
Thank you. I noticed that Charters, for instance, it was one of the excluded roads in the report. and it states that that it is in dire need of repair, but excluded from the report because the repairs require major drainage enhancements before addressing road reconstruction. And that makes sense, and I'm fine with that. But I just wanted to know if the intention is that once that's looked at, will this report be amended to include Charters, Murray, and Water Street?
What the intention was with this report is we had a cursory look of the roads that we thought needed doing, like in the immediate future. Charters Road is a considerable amount of work to do, and I believe it's in the 5-year budget. I can't remember if it's 2018 or 2019, where I think there was a considerable amount of money allocated. That's why it wasn't included in this report. Water Street, we can certainly include Water Street in the RFP. Included in this one, but it wasn't a high priority with us with regards to what it services. These roads that are identified in this report are transit routes, school bus routes, and routes that the children walk, a considerable amount of pedestrian traffic as well. That's why we chose these ones, and they're particularly bad as well. So,
just to follow up, Charters Road is a school route. And that's one of the reasons why I asked. Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification.
But it's in the budget in the coming year, so that's good. Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you to staff, just to follow up on Councillor Logan's comments with respects to Charters Road, and Sooke River Road was another one that has quite a bit of sort of potholes and cracks and stuff. So even though they're not identified to get, larger sections of the road done, will the problem areas get looked after? Because Charters has one area in particular that really needs attention.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Berger, Charters Road and some of the other roads we had, in particular Sooke River Road and Phillips Road, will be dealt with from a pothole remediation this year. Main Road, our contractor has not been able to get out there. The weather is now starting to turn, allowing the road base below those holes to dry out, because if they go in there and they do the work with the cold mix or the hot mix or whatever they're patching with, it'll just pop out until such time that it dries up. But there will be some remediations done this year. Sooke River Road, in particular, where the flooding is, I've been working with Councillor Ray on that, and hopefully we can get that thing fixed up this year as well.
Councillor Casper, please.
My question is, in the RFP, is it going to be a unit price, or is it going to be per road?
We can ask for both within the RFP. Sorry, Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper.
And so it had some notations. So it referenced chip seal. So is that what is being proposed to do the repairs, or is it dig up and just redo it?
The RFP was going to give us both.
Okay.
Because one of the roads or two of the roads need, in our opinion, it needs pulverization, and from that you can regrind the material and you can use it as chip seal, or it can come back as recirculated or regranulated pavement. Right. And we're going to put all that kind of we're going to provide for that in the RFP as well.
Okay, so there's a number of options, correct? Okay, now through you, is it possible to throw another road in the mix to get an idea of what the cost would be? And that may be a road that was excluded, but in the report it shows that they are well traveled. Well, I don't know.
We have a live motion,
right?
But you could amend it.
No, but I just wonder, is it possible to do that? I was going to say Sooke River Road or Charters or Grant Road or something. Because ultimately, it's going to come back to council to get a decision, because we've only got so much money. And I think what we'd like to do is get the biggest bang for the buck. At least that's what I would like to do. And so if there's a way to do that, depending on what road, and maybe we should throw some more in the mix. I'm not advocating, just willy-nilly getting more roads done. But right now there's what, 7? 6. I don't know. Is it possible to do that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper. Tonight, if members of council want to provide other roads that they want us to include into the RFP, I don't have a problem with doing that. And then when the report or when the RFP does come back, we'll have a unit cost and have a per road cost. And then you can do the analytical work and direct staff to do whatever road you consider that is the best bang for the buck.
Councillor Berger, then Ray.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Casper, are you suggesting another road to see if we could get a better price because we're doing more? Then I'm sorry,
no,
I'm not sure.
No.
Sorry, I got lost.
No, because right now it's based on 2 bases of pricing: a per road pricing and a unit pricing that could be applied on any road. So if it's a unit price, and if the unit price is lower than what's anticipated, then it could be applied elsewhere. So I'm thinking of a little road, Blythewood, not very far from where I live.
Oh, convenience.
But I just want to throw this out as an example. Staff 5 years ago did an estimate to do some work, and it came in at such and such a dollars, but it never got done. Nothing ever happened. And I know Blythewood was on the original list. And you go and look at that road, and I saw the pictures here, and I thought, gee whiz, that looks like that road. Now, you know what? It hasn't fallen apart. It's still travelable, but I'm just saying that if there is a unit price, then our hands aren't tied to do something that may come as a result. And don't get me wrong, I could only think of Blythewood, that's all, because I see it, because it's similar to the pictures that are here. So I'm just hoping that council can have an open mind to that. Anyway.
Okay, well, we do have a motion that's been moved and seconded already, and that's with the prioritized road. Does council want to amend, or do you want to just proceed with this? There is some reasoning as to why these roads and then the others, and we are start of a program of dealing with more roads year after year. This isn't the only year we can do this. It has to be ongoing work. So, any further discussion on this motion? All right, then. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So now we'll move to 9.3, which is your 9.2, which is the Community Amenity Contribution Policy. So as council knows, this has been something that we've wanted addressed for some time. And there is a recommendation to receive and to provide some direction from staff. And there's a couple of options. Staff, do you have anything further to present, or at this point are you just fielding questions?
Your Worship, I'll field the questions that I can, but I just want to sort of back up that from council's perspective, I was asked to come back with the information that you see and obtain direction of where council may want to direct staff with dealing with the amenity policy as it exists today.
Okay, very good. Councillor Ray, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think over my 2 terms, this policy has been one of the most difficult to understand, difficult to apply, and often feels that it comes with a fair amount of discussion. I think we should just repeal the community amenity contribution policy. We've got the ability under the Local Government Act, and I think it would just be easier at this time for both the development community, staff and council to not have that, the amenity contribution policy. So I'd like to see it get repealed.
Okay, Councillor Berger, please.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Ray. I did a bit of homework on this. I've had a few things throughout a few years, because this is another policy that causes some difficulties for staff as well as the applicants. It's difficult for staff because it's not very clearly laid out within the policy that we have as to what we're looking for. It's an outdated policy. It's back down to 2010 or 9, I believe, and it hadn't been appropriately updated. So some of the ones, when you first Google what a community amenity policy is, you get the best practices guidelines provided by the provincial government. And in there it talks to you about exactly what can and can't be done as far as community amenity policies and how they're applied. So that's a really great tool for staff. For me, I would like to leave that with them using the best practices guidelines. When you Google amenity policies amongst BC, the communities that have them are Vancouver, White Rock, Pitt Meadows, Burnaby, Squamish, and then you have Ladysmith, Peachland, Sooke, and Langford. So when you do it nationally, it's Toronto. It's all the very big cities that have them, because usually it's connected to density bonusing. And density bonusing provides a lift on what you want to do, but the BC Building Code and other provincial building codes only allow you to use a certain amount of space on your land. So most of the time you got to go up to get that extra density. So in Sooke, we don't have a whole lot of going up, and we have height restrictions within a lot of our zones. So the way our policy is, I just see it being a problem for staff. It's not really clearly identified in the way that I think that it could be. And I think even if we spent the time to break it down and have all of the appropriate charts, we're supposed to have every single community amenity laid out with a dollar sign attached to it. So that means revising this amenity or revising this policy every year, because as we all know, costs change every year. So it is very, very cumbersome, and I feel for staff in having to deal with this policy, because it's really, our policy isn't a great policy. And mostly it's not a great policy because it goes back to 2010, and here we are 7 years later. So, yeah, I agree. Like I said, I did a ton of homework on it, and I just don't think that, I think that the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, BC Building Code, all of it speaks to what can and can't be done.
Okay. Further comments from members of council? Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I'll echo Councillor Berger's statements, but I actually think even in this policy that we're looking at tonight is that there's some inaccuracies, and I've one that wanted to get rid of this ever since I've been here. So, town center says 30 dwellings per unit is our base density. Well, that's incorrect based on our town center. So there's some things even in this that are not right now, but it comes down to the way we've applied our amenity policy, and I'm not sure if there's going to be fallout from repealing this, is that we basically have been selling density, and it goes against my kind of grain of thinking ever since we've had this. So I'll be supporting getting rid of this. I'll make a motion to the effect.
Okay, so a motion to repeal the community amenity contribution policy has been moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Ray. We'll just add that affordable housing is still dealt with at rezoning as it has been, and any amenities with commercial was never covered by this policy anyway. So, but it has been challenges. I think if it's one thing that we do hear complaints of, it is this. Is there anyone in Stream that would be impacted that you can think of?
What we have is we've had a significant amount of interest on some of the projects that have been put on hold for some time.
Okay.
Mariners Village for one.
But that is its own.
It is its own CD zone, but the amenities are built into the zone.
Okay.
Knox Brook was, or whatever they're calling the one across the road here, was another one that has the amenities built into the bylaw itself.
Okay.
They may be problematic if you, not problematic, but it may require us or a future proponent wanting to reevaluate the zone at Knox Brook or Mariners or Wadams Farm is another one that they may want to revisit the zone.
And that would be fine.
And that's fine, because
Yeah.
what they could do is look at dissolving or rescinding the CD zone that is appropriate to the property and going to the CTC zone or another commercial zone, and then we could work with them further on that.
Yeah, I mean, they've been idle for quite some time, so then that's where, there would be a case then if just to see what happens, we could deal with them sort of case by case.
Yeah, the only one that I'm aware of that's in stream is the Air Road, the 2 properties on Air Road.
Okay.
We have correspondence that was received yesterday, I believe, from the proponent. I haven't read it yet, but it was being dealt with by one of the planners. So if it's the wish of council tonight to dissolve, if you will, this policy, then we can work with the proponent on it.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we have a live motion. Any further questions? Or Councillor Casper, sorry.
So where 219 covenants have been registered, and council made a motion to remove a 219 covenant that was on the Knox Church property, there still has to be a public hearing process or a bylaw, from what I understand, to eliminate that, because it was a condition of the original bylaw. Correct me if I'm mistaken.
No, I think
I don't know if it was, we passed a motion to that effect, but I don't know if we went through that process fully. But
we waived the public hearing requirement.
Okay, all right, fair enough. What about the others? Because I'm inclined to support where it just made no rational sense whatsoever, and quite frankly, I have no support that what we were doing was in fact the right thing to do, where we're supposedly going to be charging people $5,000 a door to make a contribution. To me, that's just patently unfair. Whereas the town center, it's $1,000. Like, that just doesn't seem right. And for what amenities, I don't know. So to me, I would strongly recommend that we look at those covenants, and if it means doing one package, listing all those properties and all those covenants, and get rid of those amenity requirements. I strongly recommend that.
Okay, back to staff, please.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper, the ones that I'm envisioning, the ones that have been put on hold, they're not covenants. They're actually entrenched in the zone. There may be PDAs associated with them, but I don't believe there's covenants. But it's something as they come up, we would deal with.
Yeah. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up that I wholeheartly support rescinding this because I don't think repealing it because I don't think our policy works. But the local government Act still gives staff the ability to work with large lot developments. The idea behind the community amenity contribution in its totality was to have, if there's a large development coming into a town, not to be a burden on any new infrastructure that would be needed to existing neighbors. So they're all dealt by one-offs. I'm not sure that I would like us to sort of repeal everything. I think, as you stated before, everything needs to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, just following the provincial standard that's there. I just don't want to see us adding more layers of stuff.
Yep, no, that's just it. And I think at the time, the rationale was that the town center was less, because then that might be more attractive and it would push the town center development, but we haven't really seen that occur. Okay, any further questions on repealing the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. So is that, unlike a bylaw, this is just done as of today? Okay. It's done. Tell your friends. It's for whoever. It's gone, finally. Okay. 11.1, Official Community Plan Update. So there is some recommendations from our Committee of the Whole from May the 1st. Turn this back to staff, so I just need to reload this.
sorry, Your Worship. I didn't want to interrupt while you were reading.
No, I just needed to bring it up.
Oh, okay. No, at the last committee of the whole meeting, there was a recommendation to bring forward to council tonight to make a motion to refer it to the next COW meeting, and staff will bring a plan or plans showing the proposed land use designation for your consideration, and a report and a staff report to accompany it.
Okay, can I just clarify when that committee of the whole will be for the dates?
Yes, Your Worship, it'll be May 29th, which is next Monday.
Next Monday, that's right, because that will be our 5th Monday, because majority of us will not be here for the first week in June because of FCM. That's a travel date, so we've moved it up. So that's agreeable with everyone? Okay. Good. So there is a motion here that council, upon recommendation from the Committee of the Whole, receive the OCP review update report dated May 1st for information. So moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Logans. Any discussion on the report or questions? We'll see everybody back next Monday then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We have some correspondence here. There's the package from May 3rd to May 16th. Move receipt by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Ray. Speaking to it, Councillor Ray.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's the letter dated May the 9th from Mr. Van Treat about the zoning of the property when we last did the zoning bylaw. I'm just trying to find which page it's on. I'm sorry. I've looked.
It's page 13, I think.
283 of the package.
Okay.
The printed package.
Printed package, okay.
And it's it's around the Nagle and Gillespie roads, and having had their zoning altered without their knowledge. And just as a note, I have spoken to our CAO about this, but I think it is something that needs to be addressed sooner than later. And what's happened is, and I understand that's what's been stated in the letter, is if any of these homes were to burn down, they would not be able to rebuild because the zoning has changed. So I think it needs to be a priority in terms of addressing this.
Okay, so we can clear the first one, and there is a live motion, Councillor Ray, and then perhaps you could make a second motion after that. Does that work? Okay. Councillor Loggins?
I would be willing to make an amendment to the motion to just move receipt for the items except for that specific letter from the 9th.
Okay.
If that makes it easier.
And then we can send it to staff. Just corporate officer? Sorry, Miss.
Yeah, you can just receive all the correspondence as one, and then we can deal with separate ones.
Okay.
On the side.
We'll do that. Okay. So I'll just call the question then on receiving and filing. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And then the second part of that then is to refer this letter to staff, please. And
yes.
Okay, so
to refer back to staff for a report, so that they can provide us with the options in terms of addressing this. Okay,
so that's a motion from Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Pearson. And speaking, Councillor Pearson.
And thank you, Councillor Ray, for pointing this out. This is going back to this RU4, and I'm going to call it fiasco, that's gone on now, that somehow was slid in there, and I think that we need to look at the complete RU4 zoning change for our entire area.
Okay.
So it's something that came out of planning that I'm not sure how it got adopted, because we did it to several properties. We downzoned several properties throughout the area, and anyways, I'd like to see that in our report, Councillor Casper. Oh, sorry. I know he has comments on it as well. So I apologize.
You're out of order, sir. Councillor Casper, proceed, please.
Yes, I would like to echo those comments made by Councillor Pearson. I would think there's probably anywhere between 300 and 400 parcels that were downzoned. They did have previous zones, but for some reason, when Bylaw 500 was adopted in 2005, and then it had to be redone in 2006. It was deemed at that time that the RU4 zone would be established, and there was reference to it in the official community plan. What that did is that it eliminated a number of other zones that had been established for 1.25 acre size lots, which is equal to half a hectare. There are lots up, for example, off Burr Road and all the other roads just off Otter Point, the subdivisions up there that had legal zones, and they're all zoned RU4 right now. Which none of it makes any sense whatsoever. And to me, it just came across patently unfair to those property owners. And in looking at this item, I think it's important to look at the others too.
Okay, so that motion's good then, and we can get into this. Okay. Including, perfect. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, that's all our correspondence. So that brings us to council and CAO reports. Report, Councillor Ray.
I wrote it on the back of a piece of paper. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Just a quick update. I attended the Vancouver Island Regional Library Executive Meeting on April the 28th. I also attended the Library Open House held here by the staff on May the 2nd. It was held at the Community Hall. We had a smaller turnout. I think sometimes it's difficult to have those meetings during the weekday when people are busy with children and stuff. But we did have some good input. Great ideas were presented, and I think the rural staff were pleased with what came from that meeting. And I did the CREST meeting. We did 2 tours of the radio sites. One is called the Belmont House. It has the radio tower that gives the best reception for most of the South Island, particularly the Victoria area, and a new one in a park in Esquimalt. So it's a quite interesting and challenging to get our radios to work. And one of the things, the fire chief isn't here tonight, but wanted to reassure him that the board is recognizing the challenges between having a digital system as well as the VHF system in terms of what will work and what doesn't work, particularly in the Sooke with our geographics. And I attended CPART Commission on behalf of Councillor Berger, and just to make sure everybody knows that Senior Day is Monday to Friday if you want to golf at the Demamiel Creek. So every weekday is Seniors Day. Come all out and have fun.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. And what that involves is that you get 2 rounds for the price of 1. So it's during the week, as typically when our more seasoned residents are available to play. It's excellent feedback on the course, but it's to get some more people out enjoying and experiencing it, because word of mouth is what makes the most impact. A few updates. Primary Health is meeting this week just to put our framework together to go to the CRD. The board did endorse the recommendation that came from Housing and Hospitals, so the timing is great for that. I met with some one of our local proprietors of medicinal marijuana. There is an event on Saturday at the community hall, and it's about just the awareness on what's occurring in that industry. It'll be held at the community hall this Saturday, or pardon me, 2 weeks this Saturday. Some of us will be in Ottawa. Councillor Berger will be attending the high school grad ceremony on my behalf, and will give a message from council. So have fun with that, and it'll be a very moving moment for Councillor Berger as her son is graduating that day as well. Tears are allowed in that speech. There was a gathering of folks for tourism, and that also included our local tourism routes, just as they're putting a plan together for the Pacific Marine Circle route. So our local visitor center was there, along with folks from Tourism Victoria, and it's part of the overall plan that's occurring. I do have a meeting with the UBCM President's Committee is having a conference call actually in a couple of days. It'll just be discussing the outcome of the provincial election, which I understand we may know the outcome tomorrow, and just that impact on UBCM and what our next stages are. So that's kind of exciting thing to look forward to. One thing that's come up in a lot of meetings, conversations, open mic forums, and the like is just a need for a bit more togetherness amongst the development community, council, and staff. So it's come about a bit about some form of a working group, committee, or something to be formed. Now, I've been floating all sorts of ideas your way on committees and the like. Here's another one I will propose because I think it's necessary, and that's just a development committee. Select so that have 3 councillors, 3 members of the public, would like staff support, just because I continually hear that people are running the gauntlet to have their projects come to fruition. I think everyone's end game is the same. We want to see Sooke build in an attractive, vibrant way that takes in the needs of our community, the growing needs, and is also respectful of the past as well as respectful of due process. So a thought would be to have a committee like this just sort of tackle it, because in this session where you have a delegation come forward at the start, we don't get into our regular agenda for sometimes almost an hour, and the meeting can go very late. Is that the best forum, this more formal setting? Committee of the Wholes are really focused on our OCP now, and we'll have a number of different policies also come forward that will need their attention. So where does something like this sit? So perhaps that sort of a committee may be of interest to you. So let me know what you think. Perhaps it could meet during the day because Mondays are typically reserved for council. And we have to see, I would like staff there for recording and also just to be a part of the conversation. It could be during the day. And if there is no interest, then I'm right now just of the mind of forming a working group to deal with this. The primary health working group has had a lot of success just bringing stakeholders together, focused on what a really clear goal is and just moving ahead constantly, and has had success. So, but at the same time, I think it would be of benefit to have councillors present, because your collective knowledge, experience, feedback, the work you do in the community, all of that lends itself into the togetherness aspect that I think we really need and could achieve. And I just think this is too formal to really dig into that, and we have a lot of other business of the day to also get through. Now, kudos to everyone. Amenity policy, gone. Like, we didn't spend a lot of time dealing with that, but I know we've been thinking about it for a long time. So there's been a lot of thought there. So that's just what I feel has been percolating and it's been on my mind recently. Okay. Councillor Berger?
Thank you, and a huge thank you. Because you notice at the end of the agenda, I have a notice of motion, and it's directed to sort of that exact same thing. And part of these development applications that I want to have looked at. Again, I go back to what I said with the community amenity policy. There has been some turmoil in the development community because lots of our policies and applications are so out of date. We haven't touched them in 10 years. And I don't know what the right form to do it in. And my suggestion that I have written along with this notice of motion was exactly that. So thank you very much. I think it would be a huge asset for not only the development community, but huge for our staff. I mean, our staff go back and forth with certain developers, or they try and make things work within our policies, but our policies they're not live all the time. They're not fluid. We're not keeping up. And unfortunately, that's something that lies within this table. So I thank you for recommending that, because I think that will be huge.
Okay, so give it some thought. Yeah, like if it's because we have the options, right? I mean, if it's a select committee formed by the mayor, then it has to be half and half. You have to have at least half of council and half of staff. That's just the way it is, at least half. If it goes the other way, then there can only be one councillor on it, and then you could have more members of the public. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, but that's the way it is, right? So, yeah, but think about it, please, and then let me know. I mean, there's a benefit. You could have more public, one liaison councillor. It doesn't stop other councillors from attending, right? Depending on your availability, when it is, and if you can come, certainly that would be part of it. So that there is that advantage, because then you would have more public there. But then also having 3 councillors, then it's a portfolio of something that you could work with that sort of builds the togetherness component too. I don't know. It's just think about it and what works. Of course you can.
So I think it's important to do this, but I think there should be timelines.
Yes, there has to be.
And I think that if there's some kind of an agenda put forward with strict timelines, then it will make it work, and things will be more beneficial to the public and to our staff, so that you can see light at the end of the tunnel. And I think our frustration, I think the public's frustration, and staff too, is that there hasn't been light at the end of the tunnel. And look at the amenity policy, going back to 2014, on again, off again, on again, off again. And so that is very frustrating for a lot of people. That's my suggestion.
And that'll come in the terms of reference for it. I think there has to be a start and an end date. I like the idea of a committee, because then it's minuted, it's open to the public, things are recorded properly, and then there's something to reflect. So that's why I like that committee piece, and I think that's important. So I'm just throwing it out there, so give it some thought. I also do think, since I'm on a roll now talking about committees and some traction here, is that I do believe that the Sooke program of the Arts Committee needs to be reinstated as well. I think it had a lot of success in its time, and we are gathering funds for this through the revenue. So it's the case of, to not have a committee but to collect the funds doesn't feel appropriate to me either. And as we have things like a library, a new public building come in, the public piece of artwork should go hand in hand with that, some sort of installation, or as we see other things occur in the town center. I think that's a part of it. I mean, we're not doing anything for Canada 150. It's kind of too bad. But I think we have the Tellus mural. Like, there's just a number of things, and art is in the fabric of our community. So give that some thought as well. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We have terms of reference for that committee that are just sitting. It's the case it can just be reignited again, and we don't have to adopt unless there's recommendations from that. So another piece to think about. Okay, so I'll turn over any update from our acting CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And members of council, just update, I went to the LGMA conference last week in Penticton. Attended some good sessions there, one on building inspection. Definitely that's, I think, an area we got to focus some attention to, and finding a way to speed along the process for the permits themselves, because to me the permit and a subdivision, anyway, we'll we can get there. I am meeting with Fire Chief, who the building team now reports to. So we are going to be working on that together as staff. It's timely with the development group community because that's where I hear it from too. And now that I'm actually going through the building process myself, I see it too. So it's something we will address and we will make better. So the other one that got a lot of attention there was the bullying and harassment sessions. That was probably the highest attended session of the whole conference. So it was a good conference, and taking some of that back and help make things better around here. Like to report we have a new staff member as of today, Sharon Evans, who's our new general support clerk sitting up front. We're still going through some other of the postings. There will be a posting up today, maybe up already, for the IT support person. So we're just working through that as we can.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Okay, so that moves us into notice of motion 15.1, rezoning and development application forms. There's a notice of motion by Councillor Berger that Council directs staff to bring the rezoning and development application forms back to Council for discussion and update. So Councillor Berger is moving that, so we just need a seconder, and then seconded by Councillor Parkinson. And go ahead if you want to speak to it.
Seems odd, but I'll make an amendment to my own motion that this go to the newly formed development committee when it's done.
We have to form the committee, so we'll just be. Can we send it to a forming committee, or a committee that hasn't formed yet, or one we're in the process of forming? Or to council or appropriate. Or okay, let's do that. How's that, Councillor Berger? Perfect. Okay. Any further comment on it?
Sorry, I think you've covered it all off, and listening to our acting CEO, Mr. Blackhall, as well, I think it is very timely that we get updating some policies with respects to development and streamlining things, so I think it's great.
Great. Any further discussion on the notice of motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Report of released in camera resolutions. I don't believe there is any. So number 17, motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Berger, seconded by Councillor Loggins. For everyone that's traveling to FCM in Ottawa, have a safe trip there and back. We will see you. Oh, I'll see you next Monday at the Committee of the Whole. But I will be taking some vacation the first 2 weeks of June, so that puts Councillor Berger as acting mayor. All those in favor of adjournment? Opposed? One opposed in the audience.